Hello everybody, it's Mike here at Game From Scratch, and a couple of days ago, one of my favorite HTML5 game frameworks out there was just released in version 3, Phaser 3.0, and I love Phaser. I used it extensively, Phaser 2. I did a full Phaser with TypeScript tutorial series on Game From Scratch if you're interested in checking that out. So once Phaser 3 was released, of course I had to go ahead and check that out as well, and this video is sort of the accumulation of that effort. Now, as I mentioned, it was just released the other day, and this is kind of a double-edged sword. It is an improvement on Phaser 2, cleaner code, more modular, new renderer underneath, just basically designed to be better for the future, more future-proof, etc. But there is a relative lack of tutorials right now, which is kind of where this fills in. Now, you can learn it. So far, I've been kind of learning things by prior experience, jumping into the examples that are available, and jumping into the source code. But there's no formal tutorials out there yet. So I thought I'd do a bit of a getting started tutorial, which is what we're going to cover today. And really, we're just going to look at creating kind of a contrived example using the Phaser game engine, but it's going to show you kind of the kernel of what you would need to create a game and give you a good idea if Phaser looks like a good fit for you. And so without further ado, let's jump in and go ahead and create it. Now, obviously, you're going to need Phaser. You can either use a CDN link. There's a couple available on the Phaser website, or you can download the source file yourself. That's what I've done. I've gone to the GitHub page. I will link the GitHub in the description down below. But just go on into, so in the GitHub page, go into distribution or dist. And what I want right now is phaser.js. This is the full-blown one. It hasn't been minified, makes it easier to debug. When you deploy, obviously, you switch this out to the one of the other options. But we're going to go ahead with phaser.js. Right-click the download and save that target and save it into your directory. So you want this JS file somewhere in your directory. Now, for the example, I'm going to be using WebStorm, which is a great commercial JavaScript HTML5 IDE from JetBrains, the makers of IntelliJ and CLion, various other ReSharper, etc. Great IDE tools. But you can use whatever you want. I'm using it today because it has excellent code completion, and it's got some really nice presentation mode stuff to make it easier for you to see the code we're dealing with today. You see here, I dropped that phaser.js in the root of my project here, and other than that, all I have so far is an index.html. Very straightforward, as you can see here. About as stock standard as you get when it comes to a web page. And now we're going to have to bring in that Phaser library. So basically just link in, say, yep, we want Phaser, like so, and we're good. So now we've linked in Phaser. Where are we going to go from here? Well, we're also going to need somewhere to hide our code. I hate putting it all into the HTML file, so let's create a new file. And we will link that in as well. Let me create the file first, and then we'll link to it. So new file, we'll call it game.js, like so. So it's our JavaScript file going to be. And then down here, back in our index, we'll just link to it, like so. All right, so we have our game set up. Time to get into some coding. First off, we're going to be creating a JSON file for the configure, or a variable for the configuration settings for starting up our game. So var config, and let me just make that bigger. Hopefully you can see that just fine. Equals, I don't really need this up here for now. Squiggly. All right, so type, this is the scaling type for Phaser to use. It's phaser.auto. So, the width, I bet you can guess the height. So, and then we're going to configure our physics too. So we're going to use the build. They have 3 different kinds of physics engines for 2D physics in Phaser. The one we want to use is called Arcade. It's just a quick physics engine. And then for arcade settings, if you're not using physics, this part is completely optional. We're only going to use physics once, actually, but I'm going to show you how to do it. Gravity is y200. Close that off, close that off, close that off. And then we're going to be doing this scene by scene. You don't have to do it scene. We can actually all do all of our logic together in this single game.js file if we wish. But what I've instead decided to do is break this game into different scenes. And we're going to ultimately create 3 different scenes. You know what, let's go ahead and create them all right now. So new, file, example 1, JS, new file example 2.js, and guess what this one's going to be? Example 3.js. Now, scenes are more important than they were in the previous version of Phaser. They're basically an organizational unit for breaking your game down into chunks. And so let's go on back to our configuration file that we were working on there. And what we are now going to do is tell it what scenes are available. Scene, and this is an array. We got example 1, example 2, and example 3. So those are our 3 different scenes. And now let's go about, actually we're going to start just for now, let's just create our first scene. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. And then that should be the end of our config object. There. So now we've got how we want the Phaser engine to be configured and what scene we want it to go ahead and use. Now what we need to do is go ahead and create one. Var game equals new phaser.game, and we pass in our configuration like so. At this point in time, as soon as we actually have a valid scene, so it's not going to throw up, as you can see there's a little squiggly going on here, we are going to, oops, my bad. We are going to have our logic fired off in this guy when our new game is created. So now let's switch over to it and get things started. So this is our first scene. Excuse me. Pause for a second. Oops. I called it example. I actually want to stay consistent here. So let's just find, refactor, rename, and I actually want you to be example 1. All right. That's better. Now let's go over to example 1 and get some coding going. So this is, as I mentioned, a scene. So we're going to call this class example 1. That is ultimately what this is looking for right here. And before we also get too far ahead, we need to bring our code in. So let's do 1, 2, 3. Don't need these 2 yet, but this one is example 1. So that links in our code so that it is actually available. So now let's go back to authoring our code. So class example extends phaser.scene. For the record, I am using ECMA script 6 style syntax for this example. Why are you getting upset? Well, I am trying to use, just a second, file, settings, JavaScript, ECMA 6. Now get over yourself. Okay. Why are you paused? 1 second. All right, it just had to get its head out of its butt. All right, so constructor. This is called when this object is created, and in this case, we do something very, very simple. We call its parent constructor, and we are passing in simply a key or an identifier of what this guy is called so that it can be found by name, and it is called example1. This enables it to be easily looked up as a scene, and really that's all we need to do constructor-wise. Now the cool thing in the way this works is what we're going to do is just like in a lot of game engines, we're going to handle various different callbacks in the life cycle of our program and do our logic there. First call back is preload. This is early on. This is where you go ahead and load your assets, and that's exactly what we were going to do. On the topic of assets, we need some. What we need to do, go down here and create a new directory. We shall dub the directory assets, and we're going to have a couple of assets. I'm going to bring them in from over here. SPC, C, temp, phaser 3, assets. And all I've really got is a JPEG and an MP3 file. I'm just going to grab those and drop them into the assets folder. So, yep. So now we have our 2 assets available. Those are the only examples we're going to, only media files we're actually going to use for any of this coding example going forward. And now, as you notice, we just dropped the JPEG in, and we're going to go ahead and load and display that. So this load image, it was called, this is actually the key that we're going to identify it by. So this is the unique identifier for us to locate it again. And then next up is the actual name of the image, and it was jfs.jpg. Okay, so And boom. So that's the line of code you would use to preload an image ready for use, and it's identifiable later on via that key right there. Now we can go ahead and actually use that image, and that's what we're going to do next. So the next callback in the lifecycle we're going to use is create. So this is when the scene is actually created. Preload will have already been called, as will obviously the constructor. And in create, what we're going to do is create that image. This.image equals this add image created at location 400, 300 using the key GFS. So this is how it knows which image to go ahead and use. And really that should be it. And we can stop here for now. This is our first running example. In theory, let's go ahead and run that. That's why I say in theory, nothing ever works out of the box, does it? All right, so let us bring up our trusty F12 developer console. Example 1 is not defined. Example 1 is not defined. Game index. All right. Obvious error of some form here. Just a second. All right. So example 1 is defined there. We are in the code for example1.js. All right. So we're good to go. Go back to index. Make sure that that is in fact being brought in. Example1.js is being brought in there, and let's make sure we use the right name here, example1. All right, 1 second. Oh, I think I know what I did stupid here. Order of operations. So at the point where game is being called, I haven't included it yet. So that was that mistake. I imagine that is going to fix things up. There we go. All right, so we just created our first application actually, so congratulations, well done. What we've done is basically drawn an image centered on screen. This is obviously that file I dropped into our assets folder, so you could use whichever image you wished. But in this case, that's what we're doing. Fairly straightforward example. We didn't actually need to take a cache copy of it. This is just so we can refer to it later on. So this line alone would have accomplished, this part of the line over here alone would have accomplished everything we needed to do. So now that we have that image in there, let's mess around with it. So there's a couple different things we can do here. First off, we can move it on keyboard input, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways to handle keyboard input. There's signal-based polling, so basically we handle on events. Let's start with that one. So we're going to do this.input.keyboard.on. So we're triggering the on event for key up underscore D. So if you press the D key, so we're going to use WASD keys. So we're going to go right on this one. So this is going to be when that is called, oops, one too far. We're going to call this function right here. So, and all we will do when that is called is this.image.x plus equals 10. Now, one of the things you're going to, and I've always hated this about JavaScript, but this is mutable. So in a callback handler like this, this isn't this. Very confusing thing. So what you can do is you actually pass context in almost every case by passing an additional parameter of this, and that makes this, not that. Clear, right? This is this and not that. You got it? Anyways, it's one of those JavaScript idioms. I hate it. It's probably one of the worst things about JavaScript language itself. But just know if you are inside of some kind of a callback and you're getting syntax errors or some kind of an error or undefined or null or kind of throwback, it is probably because context was not preserved and you just need to go ahead and add this to your call. And it will pass in and properly conserve context. All right, let's save that, see what happens. So if I go back here, we run our code, click to focus, press D, and you'll see every time, so I'm holding down D, it's not doing anything. But every time I press it, we move by 10. So that's one way of handling input. Now, next up, we're going to look at another way. This is going to be instead, if we want to trigger on the A key. Another way we can do this basically is via registering a poll basically on it. So I'm going to do another variable, this.key underscore A equals this.input.keyboard.add key. And this is going to monitor the status of the key we're passing in. So phaser.input.keyboard.key codes.a. There we go. And that should be all we need. So basically what this line of code basically does is creates this variable which is monitoring that key. So now what we're going to do is use more of a traditional game loop approach and poll for input. So now update is passed in a parameter of delta. That's the amount of time called since the last update. Update is basically your main game loop. That's what this is implementing here. I implemented that wrong. Sorry. So this is going to be called every pass through the main loop or the main game loop. You can use this to obviously update what's going on in your code. And in this case, we're going to do it very simple. Let's do if this dot key underscore a dot is down. And in that case, we will move this dot image dot x to the left. Now you notice in this case, I jumped up by 10. In this case, I'm only going to jump by 1. Well, that's because this is going to fire a hell of a lot more often than that. Basically, this is going to fire every time that the key is down during the loop. So if the loop is running at 60 times per second, for example, this is going to be true if you've held the key down for an entire second 60 times. So this will be true exactly once per key press. This is like more of a state check. So it's kind of two different approaches to input, polling versus event handling. So the polling method, you have to use your logic a bit different. What fits your game really kind of comes down to you. Oops, let's go on back here. Let's go run that code now. So you'll see right again, and then left, if we hold it down, we get a nice smooth turn-ish, smooth. So that's pretty solid. Okay, now what are we going to look at? Well, how about handling the mouse? Yeah, that's a good call. We're going to do the mouse with polling. Sorry, but the event-driven. And we're just going to fire it up just like we did with our keyboard handler. So input just on, and we're going to check for the general pointer down event, like so. And when that fires, like this, what should we do? Well, we're being passed in the event args. Part of that is the X and Y location of the current mouse cursor. And let's just move our image around relative to the location of our mouse. So this dot image dot x equals event dot x. This dot image dot y equals event dot y. So now let's go ahead and run our code. And I have an error. Bring up our trusty error console. Unable to set property x of undefined. Oh, look. All right, so here you go. Like I said, my least favorite part about JavaScript. Why is this going why? Why does property.x of undefined not exist or no reference? What the heck? Well, that is the stupid mutability of this. There we go. So now, without this variable, this makes absolutely no sense, and this makes absolutely no sense, which is why this was being passed in. And I'm going to make that error a lot. All right, so now you'll notice every time I click, we relocate to wherever I was, and then once again we can use A and D to move our image around. Pretty cool. So basically showing you that's input. Pretty easily handled. It's a couple of different ways of doing things, a couple of different approaches, but nothing outrageous. Now let's actually take a look at physics for a second. This is actually kind of cool. We're going to create a physical object on the fly. Say every time we press the P key, for P for physics. Input handler once again. So let's create one more of these. This dot input dot keyboard dot on. Try and keep my brackets consistent. P function event squiggle. Come on. Hey, I'll do it right away. All right, so in this particular case, what we want to do is create a physics-based object and then just sort of throw it randomly into space. We'll do it at the location. We're going to stick with our game from scratch logo for our physics object, but we're essentially creating a new image at this point. So physics image. Notice it's a var, it's local. This dot physics dot add dot image. This dot image dot x. This dot image dot y. So like I said, we're going to create it at the same location as our current image is, and we're also going to use the same image graphic for us before. So I'm just passing in the key of the type of image to create. And since this is a physics image, let's go ahead and physics image dot velocity or set velocity. velocity. It's phaser.math.rand into RNG integer in range minus 100, 100. So basically we're going to give it a random x value between minus 100 and plus 100, and we're going to do minus 300 in the y-axis. Now you remember earlier in our config, we set gravity is 200 down. Oops, where did that go? There we go. So remember, gravity is this way. So what we're going to do is basically throw things up and randomly left or right every time we hit the P key. Pretty contrived example, but an example nonetheless. I think that, all right, I'm definitely missing a bracket here. Oh, wait, nope, I have too many. You dastardly brackets. Okay, let me zoom out a bit. It's getting kind of hard to keep everything on screen for me here. Actually, that's probably easier. Okay, so that is that. I think I have not made any errors, which of course means I have no doubt made an error. All right, so we can move things around, and the cool thing is now I can press P, and you will notice random locations. Ta-da! And I can just keep doing this. We're just going to spin these things off into space till the cows come home. But there you can see gravity in action. It goes off in the velocity specified, gravity kicks in, and then out it goes. The cool thing is I can actually tell it very easily to say, all right, collide with the screen here. Set the restitution, have things bouncing around the screen like mad, but I'll leave that as a project for a later time. But as you saw, very simple to implement graphics drawing, input handling, and even physics. Some pretty cool stuff here. So let's move on to something else. What would that? Well, I guess this is a good point in time to actually get down to, let's switch between some scenes. And we're going to do this again with an input handler. So go back down here. And this .input.keyboard.on. Key up. This is a generic keyboard handler. So basically anytime a key is released, this is going to fire. And you could have done this earlier on and handled all of these in there, but I'm trying to showcase how input can do. So you might notice we're doing a lot of these stupid this.input.keyboard handling. This is one way of collapsing all of your key handling together into one section. So you could turn this into it. You could break this guy down into it. If you wanted to switch from polled to event driven, you could switch this guy into here as well. So basically on any key firing, this function will be called. And let's go ahead and again, oops. Why did you tab out weird? Doesn't really matter. All right, so what shall we do? I knew you weren't happy about something. There we go. Why are you upset? Seems I blew away a semicolon. All right, I think we should be happy again. So what we're going to do here is on the number keys, if you press 2 or if you press 3, we're going to switch between the different scenes now. Remember, we created placeholders earlier, so let's go ahead and use the second scene now. So if e.key, just like earlier on, the mouse parameters were passed as part of the pointer down event. The key is passed as part of the input event. So if the key equal 2, this.scene.start example 2. So there we go. Now we're going to fire off our other scene when that is hit. And then ultimately we will implement scene 3 here this way as well later on. So now it's time to set up example 2. First off, let's go back over to index, and now we'll include that in so that it exists in our world. Example 2, like so. And example 2 time. Really wish this guy kept the file size for everything. All right, so class example 2 extends phaser.scene. And once again, constructor and super key on example 2. Very straightforward, exact same process. Call our parent constructor, pass in the key that tells it that we are identified as example 2. So what are we going to do in this example? Well, we are going to do some text to start with. So let's go here in our create call, like so, and let's create some text. This.text equals this.add.text. Notice consistency and how things are done. At 0, 0, we will call this welcome to example 2. And some font details, font, colon, and let's do this as 40 pixel impact. All right, there. All right, that should be it. I think that's all we need. So let's go ahead and save that and find out if our code is working. Let's press play. We are on our scene. Press 2. All right, we are partway there. Oh, my fault. All right, I already know what I did. We need to go back to game and add example 2 to our scene list. All right, see if that was it. 2. All right, that was part of it. All right, I think I'm down to a web caching issue here because if I just head on back over to WebStorm, run my code again. So here we are, hit 2, and there we go. We are now in welcome to example 2. Now let's make that a little bit more exciting. Let's throw a tween in there. Now tween is just a way of extrapolating between two states. Tween stands for in between, so it's going to calculate all of the locations and spaces in an animation between point A and point B based off your logic. So let's create a tween. Var tween equals this.tweens.add. Notice a trend yet. And the target. Targets. You can actually have multiple targets. In this case, we are just going to target our text. X colon 200, Y colon 250. So this is where our tween is going to try to get to. Duration. This is how many milliseconds it is going to take to get there. So 2 seconds. Easing function to use, we're going to use elastic. This is basically the smoothing of how that animation is going to happen. Ease params. This is an array of values of how to ease over time. Don't pay any attention to me on that one because I have to look that one up again. And delay is how long to wait before actually doing it. And I'll show that one later on. So, so that is a example tween, like so. Well, guess what you need to do? Yeah, that again. That way it knows what this .text actually resolves to, because again, JavaScript. So I take that out. That was an error, and I put it there. Code, comma, oops. There. All right. That should be right. And let's go ahead and save that. Let's run our code. I don't know what I just clicked, but I don't want that. All right, so let's just do a full reload of this. So back to here, switch to scene 2. And there you see, waits a second, over a 2-second period, it bounces off to the location requested, and you saw it bounced elastic style because of the easing function that we passed it. Now another cool thing we can do is actually trigger this to fire an on event handler for when it's actually done. So for example, on complete, there are a number of different states you can do on start, on progress. There's a bunch of different ones available, but on complete is the one we care about here. Source and target are the two args passed into that guy, like so. All right, and this function is going to fire off when it's done, and what we're just going to do is once it is finished, this will refer to basically the target right here, text, and all we're going to do is set it back to 0. So x equals 0. This is coincidentally an array because, as I mentioned earlier, you can have multiple targets. So x back to 0, y back to 0, and just for giggles, let's change the color too. So 0 dot set color. Let's go with a built-in red. All right, let's give that guy a shot. We'll run that out and switch over to 2. Boom, fires off. And then back to normal, and then turns red. So that is a tweens being shown, fonts being shown, and yeah, pretty much that's about it. And, oh, I guess callbacks kind of being shown. Let's put in one last piece of logic here, and flip back to our main screen when we press the key 1. So use the same logic as before. Var, oh sorry, not var. This dot key underscore 1 equals this dot input dot keyboard dot add key phaser dot input dot keyboard dot key codes dot 1. All right, so when we hit the 1 key, head back to the other screen. So let's do that in our input handler. Why do I always do that? All right. If this dot key 1 dot is down, and same logic as before, this dot scene dot start example 1. Ta-da! All right, let's go ahead and run. So again, there is our code. I hit 2, we fire off to our example, hit 1, and we're back to our first example. 2 and 1 shows you basically how to switch between scenes. So now we're going to do one last example, and that's example, guess which one? 3. Example 3, pretty straightforward. Once again, let's make sure that we've got an example 3. And we do. And this time I'm going to remember to add it to the array. So that's in game.js. We will add that here. I'm actually going to make sure that I remember to save it this time, because I think that was the problem before. And once again, class example 3 extends phaser.scene. Like so. And now we're going to show you very, 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 very simple audio. So we have our setup to do first. Once again, in our constructor, we got to set our key. Super key colon example 3. All right. So preload, just like we loaded our image before. Now what we need to do is load our audio file. I'm just going to get into the basics here. Web audio is a very complicated issue when it comes to web browsers. This allows you to provide multiple different file formats, and it actually uses the one that's available. But in this particular case, I am just going to go with, I think it was an MP3 file I chose. Yeah, an MP3, which is actually not going to work on a certain platform. I don't remember which one. But I'm not going to care about that today. So if you get into web audio, research the subject a lot more than what I'm just showing you here, because it's a strangely complicated subject. But it's not in Phaser. It's actually very simple. So this .load.audio, we're going to give it the key of test. I don't know why. And then this is an array of files. Like I said, you could pass in an MP3 format, an OGG format, etc. All the different file formats supported can be passed in as an array, and Phaser can figure out which one is best for your platform. Or you can be lazy and just use an MP3. Okay, gfs.mp3, like I have here. All right, so in theory, that loaded our MP3 file. So now in our crate, let's use it. How do we play a sound effect? Pretty simple. This.sound effect equals this.sound.add test. So there by the key, and we will give it the incredibly annoying parameter of loop of true. And that is that. All right, so in theory, load our game, switch to scene 3. Oh, I didn't put switch to scene 3 logic in. Yeah, that's a bad thing. All right, so head on back over to example 1. Let's do some cut and paste. So if you press the 3 key, go to scene 3. All right, well, let's try that again. So here we are, we're in our game, press 3 key. Hey, you. All right, why are you doing this to me? Oh, actually, it's not doing anything to me. I'm just being an idiot. All right, so we added our audio. We actually didn't just do anything with it. So this dot sound effect dot play. There we go. Now let's go ahead and run that up. So there's our example. Hit 3. And there is our audio running. It gets annoying fast, trust me. So let's play with it a bit. What can we do? Well, for one thing we can do is sound effects dot rate. We can play it playback rate. So let's slow it down. Or we can do the opposite and speed it up. That might be a little excessive. Or let's throw it somewhere in the middle. So obviously you can easily change the playback speed of it. But we also got a lot of control over sounds at runtime. So we're going to go back to our keyboard handling. And the first thing we're going to do is that looping. That looping gets annoying fast, so what if we want to turn that off? Well, this dot input dot, let me get the screen back. This dot input dot keyboard dot on key down L. So we hit the L key. We do this. This dot sound effects dot loop equals, oops, sorry, wrong one. This dot sound effects dot loop. So basically flip whatever the value is. If it's looping, don't loop. Otherwise, do the opposite. Now, of course, if it was not looping, it's probably not playing either. So in that case, this dot sound effects dot loop. So if we are supposed to loop, well, let's go ahead and make sure our sound effect is in fact playing. So, I don't think I made any errors there. We shall see. Fire that off.
Game from scratch rounds. Game from scratch rounds. Game from scratch rounds.
So, no loop.
Game
Loop.
from scratch rounds.
No loop.
Game
Loop.
from scratch rounds. Game from scratch rounds.
No loop. So, that's one thing we can do. Now, another one we can do is this dot input dot keyboard dot on key down underscore P. And this is for pausing. So function E and this. So this dot sound, oh no, that's an if. If this dot sound effects dot is playing, if we hit the P key, let's pause it. Else this dot sound effects dot resume. That's it. All right, let's go ahead and, did I shut it down? I did. All right, let's run it.
Game from scratch rounds.
So now I can hit
Game
P,
from
and we in the middle of our sentence,
scratch rounds.
and resume.
Game
Pause,
from
resume,
scratch rounds.
pause, resume, pause, resume, blah, 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 blah.
Scratch rounds. Game from
So that's the very basics of audio. There's so much more to it. There's things such as audio sprites for, you know, having a bunch of them all together, optimized, ready to fire off fast like for like gunshots, explosions, etc. But that is beyond what we were going to cover today. In fact, everything else is beyond what we were going to cover today. That was a 40-minute introduction to watching me stumble about in JavaScript, which I haven't used in a while, to showcase Phaser 3, perhaps my favorite HTML5 based game engine. There is not a lot of tutorial stuff out there, but what I just showed you kind of gives you the basics. It shows you how to draw basic graphics, how to handle input, both mouse and keyboard, pulled and event driven, how to organize your game into various different scenes, how to do basic audio, how to do animation tweens, how to display text. That's pretty much the building blocks to make and most simple games. Obviously, there's a whole lot more out there, and this is probably an engine I'm going to revisit in some more detail in the future, but that really comes down to you guys. Would you like to see a tutorial series on this? And to the Godot levels, don't worry, Godot series is next up. It is underway. It is going to be coming very soon. Basically, as soon as I come back from vacation next week, I'm going to start popping those videos up as well, so it will not impact that. But I do want to know if the rest of you are interested in seeing a full Phaser 3 series where I go into more depth on things like, sprite animation, tile maps, layers, shaders, all that kind of stuff. Or was this enough? Is this an introduction enough for you? Are you ready to run off to the races? Now, do be aware, again, the documentation is a little sketchy right now. So if you're trying to pick between the two, you might want to stick with Phaser 2 for now. But if you like being on the bleeding edge and you like what you saw here, do be sure to check out Phaser 3. It's a great little engine. So anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know if you want to see more coverage in the comments down below. And let me know if you found that useful in the comments down below. And let me know how hilariously bad I am at JavaScript in the comments down below. All right, that is it for now. Hope you all enjoyed that. I will see you all later. Goodbye.